I'm Alara, though the few people I hold close know me simply as Elle. At 29, I've finally carved out a life that feels like my own, a small but sunlit apartment in a city that hums with quiet possibility, and a stable, fulfilling job as a graphic designer at Linden Grove Studio. My relationship with my parents has always been a complicated tapestry, woven with threads of love, obligation, and a persistent, unspoken imbalance, especially when it came to money. Every year, for as long as I can remember, they've taken my older brother, Leo, on extravagant vacations to far-flung corners of the world, while I remained behind, a silent spectator to their adventures. This year, they surprised me with an invitation, a gesture that felt like a sudden bloom in a long barren garden. But it came with a familiar catch. I could join them on their trip to the Amalfi Coast if I paid my own way. Hungry for the inclusion I'd always craved, I agreed. I began to save, to dream, to let a fragile hope take root. And then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, a notification on my phone changed everything. It was the quiet chime that heralded the end of my silence, the beginning of a journey I never expected to take, a journey back to myself. Growing up in the Sterling household meant learning early on that affection was often transactional. My parents, Eleanor and Richard, were masters of a subtle economy of love, and I was perpetually in their debt. They never missed an opportunity to remind me that every dollar spent on my upbringing was an investment, one for which they expected a return in the form of gratitude, obedience, and, eventually, financial support. This stood in stark contrast to their relationship with my brother, Leo. It was as if two entirely different sets of ledgers were kept in our home. Leo, 3 years my senior, moved through life with an unearned grace, cushioned by our parents' unquestioning generosity. New ski equipment, a top-of-the-line laptop for his university courses, a down payment for his first car, these things appeared for him as if by magic. Meanwhile, I learned to justify every expense, from art supplies for school projects to a new pair of winter boots. Ilara, you need to understand the value of hard work, my mother would say, her voice laced with a tone of sage wisdom, just hours after approving a weekend trip to a music festival for Leo without a second thought. The most glaring symbol of this disparity was the annual family vacation. It began when I was in middle school. The Swiss Alps, Bali, a safari in Tanzania, postcards would arrive from these breathtaking places, addressed to me, but detailing the adventures of the three of them. I would stay behind, first with my grandmother and then, as I got older, alone in the quiet, echoing house. The excuse was always the same, delivered with a sigh of parental regret. We'd love to take you, darling, but we can only afford to bring one child, and Leo is older. Yet they always returned laden with expensive souvenirs for themselves and for him, a hand-carved chess set, a silk scarf, a designer watch, while a small, sad refrigerator magnet was placed in my hand, a flimsy token of their distant affection. After university, I found myself adrift in a sluggish job market. My parents allowed me to move back home, a kindness for which they charged a steep price. The rent they demanded consumed nearly my entire salary from the part-time cafe job I juggled with unpaid internships. All the while, Leo lived at home rent-free for 2 years, finding himself after deciding his master's degree wasn't the right fit. When I gently pointed out the inconsistency, my father's response was swift and dismissive. Your brother has immense potential, Ilara. We need to nurture it. You should be grateful we're teaching you responsibility. Despite the headwinds, I was determined to build a life of my own. I poured my energy into my passion for design, taking on freelance projects in the evenings, spending weekends hunched over my aging laptop, building a portfolio piece by painstaking piece. 3 years ago, my persistence paid off. I landed a junior designer position at Linden Grove Studio, a small but respected firm that saw a spark in my work. The salary wasn't extravagant, but it was enough to begin plotting my escape. Saving for my own place felt like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. Every time my savings account neared my goal, a new, unexpected expense would arise. My car would need a costly repair, my laptop would finally give out, or my parents would announce a sudden, unavoidable increase in my rent. It was a constant, exhausting battle against a current that seemed designed to pull me back under. But I persisted. I learned to cook simple, inexpensive meals. I said no to evenings out with friends. I took on every freelance gig I could find. 6 months ago, the dream became a reality. I signed the lease on a one-bedroom apartment in a charming old brick building overlooking the river. It was small, the floors creaked, and the water pressure was temperamental, but it was mine. The silence, the privacy, the simple act of making a cup of tea in a kitchen that belonged only to me, it was a profound and deeply healing joy. The day I moved my last box out, my mother surveyed my empty room with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't pride, but something closer to disappointment, as if she'd lost a crucial piece of leverage. My father merely shrugged. "We'll see how long you last without our support." Then came the phone call that shifted the landscape of our relationship. It was a Sunday evening last month. My mother's voice was unusually bright, effervescent. "Ilara, dear, we're planning the annual trip. The Amalfi Coast this year. 3 weeks in a lovely villa in Porto Fiorita. Your father and I were thinking, now that you're doing so well for yourself, perhaps you'd like to join us." I almost dropped my phone. After more than a decade of exclusion, the invitation was so surreal it felt like a dream. But then, the inevitable caveat, delivered with casual sweetness. "Of course, now that you're independent, you'd need to cover your own expenses. The flights are running about $2,000, and your share of the villa would be around $5,000 for the 3 weeks. Plus spending money, naturally." The total she outlined so breezily amounted to nearly half of the down payment I'd been painstakingly saving for a future condo. Still, a desperate, younger part of me, the girl who used to trace their vacation routes on a globe, yearned for the inclusion I'd been denied for so long. I'll think about it," I told her, my voice cautious. "Don't think too long, darling. We need to finalize the bookings by the end of next week." After the call, I spent hours staring at my budget spreadsheet. I would have to dip into my emergency fund and take on a heavy load of freelance work. It would set my own financial goals back by at least a year. But maybe it would be worth it. Maybe this was a turning point, an acknowledgement that I was finally seen as an equal, a full member of the family. The next day, I called my mother back and, with a nod of anxiety in my stomach, tentatively agreed. "Wonderful," she exclaimed. "I'll have your father handle all the arrangements. Just send us your credit card information so we can secure everything together." Something about her eagerness pricked at my intuition, a small, quiet warning bell. I pushed the feeling aside. "Actually," I said, trying to sound casual, "I'd prefer to book my own flight and just transfer you my share for the villa. I can coordinate the dates with you." "Oh, don't be silly, Ilara. It's so much easier if we handle it all as a package. We're working with a travel agent who gets us a better rate." After some gentle but firm back and forth, I reluctantly provided my credit card information, but with a very strict, explicit instruction. They were only to charge my portion of the vacation, one economy class flight, and my share of one room in the villa. For the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly, fueled by a nervous excitement. I was actually starting to look forward to it, imagining the scent of lemon groves and the taste of salt on my lips. I pictured evenings spent with my family, sharing stories and laughter under an Italian sky. Perhaps this trip would mend the fractures in our relationship, building a bridge over the years of quiet resentment. Then came the notification that would shatter the illusion. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a client meeting, presenting a new branding concept, when my phone chimed with an automated alert from my bank. "Unusual activity detected on your account. Recent charges exceed your typical spending pattern." I dismissed it, my focus on the presentation. I'd check it later. By the time I returned to my desk, 3 more alerts had arrived. A cold dread settled in my stomach, heavy as a stone. During my lunch break, I logged into my banking app, my hand trembling slightly as I navigated to my credit card statement. What I saw made the air leave my lungs. Over $18,000 in charges had been processed in the last 48 hours. My eyes scanned the list of transactions, and a horrifying picture began to form. 3 business-class round-trip tickets to Naples. Not the single economy ticket I had agreed to. A private seaside villa in Porto Fiorita for 21 nights, paid in full. Not my share of a room. Daily car service. Private cooking classes for my mother. A guided boating excursion to Capri for my father and Leo. Wine tasting tours. Reservations at Michelin-starred restaurants. My hands shook as I scrolled through charge after charge. They hadn't just booked my portion of the trip. They had used my credit card to fund the entire family vacation at a level of opulent luxury far beyond anything they had described to me. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate, calculated act of deception. I immediately called my credit card company's fraud department. The representative, a man named Marcus with a calm, steadying voice, listened patiently as I explained the situation, my own voice tight with a mixture of rage and disbelief. So, to be clear, Miss Sterling, he clarified, these charges were made by your parents using your card information, which you provided to them for a specific, limited purpose? Yes, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But I only authorized them to charge my portion of the trip. One flight. My share of the accommodation. Not all of this. Marcus explained my options. I could dispute the charges as unauthorized, which would trigger a fraud investigation. Or I could accept them and try to work out a repayment plan with my family. If I chose to dispute, my card would be immediately frozen and reissued to prevent any further unauthorized use. As he spoke, a slideshow of memories flickered through my mind. My 16th birthday, when my parents had borrowed the $500 my grandmother had given me for a new laptop because they were a little short that month, only to never repay it. The time they'd used my first credit card as an emergency backup for a weekend trip, leaving me with a maxed-out balance and a flurry of late fees. The student loan documents they'd encouraged me to sign, which I later discovered included parent loans that had somehow become my responsibility. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the culmination of a lifelong pattern of financial abuse. I want to dispute all the charges, I said, my voice gaining a firmness that surprised me. And yes, please freeze the card immediately. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, the half-eaten sandwich on my desk forgotten. I felt a dizzying cocktail of emotions, white-hot anger, a profound sense of betrayal, and a deep, aching grief. How could they do this? Did they truly believe I would just accept a debt that would take me years to pay off, a debt that would decimate the future I had worked so hard to build for myself? I needed an anchor, a voice of reason. I called my best friend, Chloe, during my afternoon break. Chloe had been a witness to my family's dynamics for years and had never minced words about her concerns. They did what? She exclaimed after I laid out the situation. Her voice was a thunderclap of indignation on my behalf. Alara, that's not just inconsiderate. That's fraud. They committed credit card fraud against their own daughter. I know, I replied, my voice small again. But they're still my parents. Should I call them and confront them? Absolutely not, Chloe was emphatic. Not yet. They'll just try to manipulate you. They'll gaslight you into dropping the dispute. You did the right thing. Freezing the card, reporting the fraud. Now you need to prepare for the fallout. She was right. Confronting them while I was still emotionally raw would be a tactical error. It would give them the opening they needed to twist the narrative, to make me feel guilty, to pressure me into backing down. Instead, I spent that evening researching. I read about credit card fraud, unauthorized charges, and how to meticulously document everything for potential legal issues. I learned that by providing my card for a specific, limited charge, I had not given them carte blanche to use it for anything else. I created a detailed spreadsheet, one column for what had been verbally agreed upon, another for what had actually been charged. I included a timeline of all communication with my parents about the trip. I wrote down every detail of my conversation with Marcus at the bank while it was still fresh in my mind. The next day, I received an email confirming that all the charges were officially under dispute and that a replacement card would arrive within a few business days. A separate email confirmed my old card had been frozen. A strange sense of calm settled over me. I had taken a concrete, decisive action to protect myself. For the first time in my life, I had refused to be my parents' financial safety net. I had said no. That calm was punctuated by jolts of anxiety every time my phone buzzed. I kept expecting to see my parents' names flash across the screen. But strangely, no calls came. No angry texts. No demanding emails. The silence was almost more unnerving than an immediate confrontation. "They don't know yet," Chloe suggested when I voiced my suspicion. "The charges probably went through initially. They won't know about the disputes until they try to use the card again, or until the airline or the villa owner contacts them about a payment reversal." She was right, of course. For now, they were living in a blissful state of ignorance, believing they had successfully manipulated me once again. And in that knowledge, I found an unexpected sense of power. For once, I was a step ahead. I had fortified my position before the inevitable storm. I just didn't realize how quickly that storm would arrive, or how fiercely it would rage. The next few days passed in a surreal state of limbo. My parents texted me casual updates about their preparations, their words dripping with an excitement that felt macabre. "Just bought a new linen suit for Porto Fiorita. So excited." My mother texted on Wednesday. "Travel agent says the weather is going to be perfect," my father messaged on Thursday. I responded with vague, noncommittal replies. "Sounds nice. Have fun," maintaining the fragile illusion that everything was fine. A part of me, the part conditioned for a lifetime of peacemaking, felt a pang of guilt. Should I warn them? Should I tell them what I discovered and what I'd done? But another part, the part that was finally waking up, knew that any warning would simply be a strategic advantage for them. It would give them time to concoct a new narrative, a new way to pressure me. Sunday arrived. The day of departure. According to the itinerary I'd glimpsed in the fraudulent charges, their flight was scheduled for 11:30 a.m. I went in my studio, seeking refuge in the familiar rhythm of work, but I couldn't focus on the website layout that was due. "You okay, Elle?" asked my colleague, Ben, our lead web developer, during our morning coffee run. "You seem a million miles away." "Just some family stuff," I replied, the understatement of the century. Family stuff. The most complicated stuff of all." He nodded sympathetically. "Let me know if you need anything." I checked my phone compulsively, my stomach tightening with each vibration. By 10 a.m., there was still nothing. Had they somehow gotten away with it? Had they found another way to pay? At 11:15 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from Leo. "At the airport. Where are you? Mom said you were meeting us here." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, another text. "Alara, flight boards in 45 minutes. Mom's getting worried." I silenced my phone and turned back to my monitor, my heart hammering against my ribs. At 11:40 a.m., my phone began to ring. "Leo calling." I declined the call. He immediately called back. I declined again. Then the texts began to flood in, a rapid-fire barrage of escalating panic. "Emergency. Something wrong with tickets at check-in. Dad's freaking out. They're saying the payment was declined. Was your card supposed to pay for these? Alara, answer your phone. They're denying our tickets. What did you do?" My hands shook as I finally typed a response, my words cool and deliberate. "What you said. I'm paying my own way." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times as he typed and deleted. Finally, a response. "Are you serious right now? We're about to miss this flight." I took a deep breath. I only agreed to pay for my flight and my share of the villa. Not business class tickets for everyone, private tours, and a luxury villa. Check the charges. Over $18,000 on my credit card without my permission. Leo's reply came instantly. "Mom said you agreed to help with the booking. Help with booking my portion. Not fund a luxury vacation for the entire family. You need to fix this right now. Dad is yelling at the gate agent." I turned my phone off completely after that. I couldn't handle anymore. When I switched it back on during my lunch break, my screen was a battlefield. 17 missed calls, 10 from my father, 5 from my mother, 2 from Leo. A barrage of increasingly hostile text messages. From my father, "Call me immediately. You've ruined everything with your selfishness." From my mother, "I can't believe you would embarrass us like this at the airport. After all we've done for you." From Leo, "They had to rebook everything on Dad's emergency card. He says you're paying him back every cent, plus the rebooking fees. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I texted Chloe. It's happening. They're melting down. Her response was immediate. Stay strong. You did nothing wrong. Want me to come over tonight with wine and outrage? Yes, please, I replied, a wave of gratitude washing over me. The afternoon dragged on. My phone continued to buzz with calls and messages I ignored. By the time I left the studio, a throbbing headache had taken root behind my eyes. As I turned the corner onto my quiet, tree-lined street, I noticed an unfamiliar silver sedan parked across from my building. My steps slowed. I recognized the rental company sticker in the rear window. They couldn't be. They were supposed to be on a rebooked flight to Italy. But as I stood frozen on the pavement, the driver's side door opened, and my father stepped out. There she is, my father announced, his voice carrying across the quiet street. The daughter who thinks it's acceptable to commit fraud against her own family. My mother emerged from the passenger side, her face a mask of fury beneath her carefully applied makeup. From the back seat, Leo appeared, looking profoundly uncomfortable, but following their lead, as he always did. What are you doing here? I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. Aren't you supposed to be on your way to Italy? We would be, my mother snapped, if you hadn't deliberately sabotaged our vacation out of spite. I took a deep breath, grateful for the open air, for the public space. I didn't sabotage anything. I stopped unauthorized charges on my credit card. Charges I never, ever agreed to. You agreed to help with the bookings. My father's voice rose to a shout as he took a step toward me. I instinctively took a step back. I agreed to pay for my portion. Not $18,000 for a luxury trip for all of you. We were doing you a favor, including you. My mother's voice grew shrill, drawing the attention of my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who was returning from walking her small terrier. Everything all right, Alara? Mrs. Gable asked, her pace slowing as she paused on the sidewalk. It's fine, I said automatically, then corrected myself, realizing a witness might be a blessing. Just a family disagreement. My father lowered his voice, suddenly conscious of the audience. We need to discuss this inside. In your apartment. No, I said firmly, finding a strength I didn't know I possessed. We can talk right here, or we don't talk at all. Leo finally spoke, attempting his usual role as the reluctant peacemaker. Alara, come on. We're all upset. Let's just go inside and figure this out calmly. There's nothing to figure out, I replied, my gaze unwavering. I'm not letting any of you into my home. My mother's expression shifted, the anger dissolving into a performance of wounded fragility. Tears welled in her eyes. After everything we've sacrificed for you, this is how you treat us? By humiliating us at the airport and ruining the one vacation we've looked forward to all year. The vacation you were planning to make me pay for without my knowledge? I corrected her, my voice quiet but firm. We were going to pay you back, my father insisted, a line that had never been mentioned until this very moment. When? I asked. How? You still haven't paid back the $500 you borrowed from me for your laptop repair 5 years ago. Leo looked surprised at this, his eyes darting between me and our parents. My father's face reddened. That's different. That was a family emergency. It's always a family emergency when you need my money, I said, the words tumbling out, fueled by years of suppressed resentment. But I'm not really family when it comes to vacations or support or anything else that actually matters. More neighbors had started to notice the commotion. Mr. Henderson from the ground floor had stepped onto his balcony. A young couple walking by slowed their pace. My mother, ever aware of appearances, lowered her voice to an urgent, dramatic whisper. You have put us in an impossible position, Alara. We had to use your father's emergency credit card to salvage what we could of the trip. It's nearly maxed out now. That sounds like a problem you created for yourselves, I replied, pushing back against the familiar tide of guilt they were trying to generate. You will reimburse us, my father stated, his voice flat and cold. Every penny we had to spend because of your little stunt. Plus the rebooking fees. It's over $20,000 now. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless for a moment. Are you serious? You commit fraud using my credit card and now you expect me to pay you for the consequences. It wasn't fraud, my mother hissed. You gave us the card. For my portion only. Using it for anything else was fraud, which is why the credit card company had no problem freezing the card and disputing the charges the moment I reported it. My father's expression darkened. You reported us? To the credit card company. I reported unauthorized charges, yes. Do you have any idea what this could do to our credit? My mother looked genuinely aghast, as if that were the primary crime committed. Maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to steal from your daughter. Leo stepped forward again, placing himself slightly between me and our parents. Look, everyone just needs to calm down. Alara, maybe there was a misunderstanding about what you were agreeing to pay for. There was no misunderstanding, Leo, I cut him off. I was perfectly clear. And so were they in their deception. We are your parents, my mother said, switching tactics again to pure emotional blackmail. We supported you your entire life. One family vacation is the least you could do to show some gratitude. Supported me? The dam inside me broke. You charged me rent while I was making minimum wage. You made me buy my own school books while you bought Leo a new car. You excluded me from your family for 15 years. And now you're angry that I won't go into debt to fund your fantasy lifestyle. My father stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper. You will regret this, Alara. If you think you can just humiliate us and cut us off without consequences, you are profoundly mistaken. Are you threatening me? I asked, my voice rising just enough for Mrs. Gable and the other neighbors to hear clearly. He stepped back instantly, his face a thundercloud. We're leaving. But this is not over. They climbed back into the rental car. Leo gave me one last, conflicted look before sliding into the back seat. As they drove away, I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the adrenaline coursing through me, leaving me shaky and cold. Mrs. Gable approached cautiously. Are you sure you're all right, dear? That looked very intense. Family drama, I said weakly. But I'm okay. Thank you for being here. If you need anything at all, I'm in 3B. She offered kindly. Don't hesitate. I thanked her and finally made my way up to my apartment, my sanctuary. I double-bolted the door behind me. My hands were still shaking as I called Chloe. They canceled their trip and showed up at your apartment to demand you pay them? Her voice was a perfect blend of fury and validation. Alara, this is escalating. Please tell me you're going to call the police. For what? For yelling at me on the sidewalk. For the credit card fraud. For harassing you at your home. I sighed, sinking onto my sofa. I don't want to get them arrested, Chloe. I just want them to leave me alone. At the very least, talk to your landlord about installing a security camera at your door, she insisted. If they were angry enough to drive here instead of going to Italy, who knows what they'll do next? She had a point. I drafted an email to my landlord, Mr. Davies, explaining that I'd had a concerning confrontation with family members and would like permission to install a video doorbell. He responded within the hour, not only giving permission, but offering to have the building's maintenance person install proper security cameras in the hallway the next day, citing the safety of all tenants. Later that evening, I got a call from an unexpected number. It was my Aunt Clara, my mother's sister. We weren't close, but we'd always been on pleasant terms. Alara, it's your Aunt Clara. I just had the strangest, most frantic call from your mother. I sighed, weary to my bones. Let me guess. I'm a selfish, ungrateful daughter who ruined the family vacation out of spite. That was the general gist of it, she confirmed. She said you'd agreed to help with the trip and then reported your own charges as fraudulent just to punish them. It didn't sound like the Alara I know, so I thought I should call and hear your side of the story. I told her everything, the whole long, sordid history. When I finished, there was a long pause on the line. That, Aunt Clara said finally, her voice heavy, sounds exactly like my sister. She's always had a creative interpretation of financial boundaries. She did something similar to our parents when we were younger. I'm so sorry you're going through this, Alara. Her validation was a balm on a raw wound. Thank you for calling me. I was starting to feel like I was going crazy. You're not crazy, she said firmly. You're just the first one in a long time to hold her accountable. Don't let them bully you into taking responsibility for their choices. After we hung up, I felt a sliver of hope. At least one person in my family understood. As I prepared for bed, I double-checked the locks on my windows and my door and set my phone to do not disturb. I tried to convince myself that the worst was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. The following day passed in a cocoon of blessed silence. No calls. No texts. The new security cameras were installed in my hallway that afternoon, a small, reassuring electronic eye. By evening, I had almost convinced myself that my family had accepted defeat and returned home. The confrontation on the sidewalk, as ugly as it was, had perhaps been their final, dramatic salvo. I stopped at the little market on my way home, taking my time selecting fresh pasta and basil, planning a quiet, comforting meal. I felt a sense of ownership over my evening, over my life, that was new and precious. It wasn't until I turned the corner to my apartment door, arms laden with groceries, that the fragile piece shattered. My door was slightly ajar. The wood of the frame around the lock was splintered and broken. I froze, my heart seizing in my chest. My grocery bag slipped from my numb fingers, a carton of eggs cracking audibly on the floor. Someone was in my apartment. I backed away silently, fumbling for my phone. But before I could dial 911, I heard them. Familiar voices, casual and proprietary, from inside my home. It has to be here somewhere. My mother's voice drifted into the hallway. She's always so meticulous with her files. Eleanor, for God's sake, hurry up, my father's voice, nervous but complicit. We shouldn't be here. I still don't think this is a good idea, came Leo's voice, laced with a weak protest that was clearly too little, too late. They were in my home. They had broken down my door. The violation was so profound, so absolute, that it eclipsed my fear. A cold, clear rage washed over me, and something inside me, something that had been bent for 29 years, finally snapped. I pushed the door open fully. The three of them started, turning from my coffee table, where my personal file box sat open, its contents, bank statements, tax returns, contracts, spread across the surface. What the hell are you doing in my apartment? My voice was unnaturally calm, a blade of ice in the quiet room. My mother barely looked up from the document she was examining. Don't be so dramatic, Alara. We're just looking for the credit card agreement to sort out this little mess. You broke into my home. The words felt inadequate to describe the desecration. We're your parents, my father blustered, though his eyes darted nervously towards the open door behind me. We have a right to be here. No, I said, pulling out my phone. You don't. This is breaking and entering. It's a felony. And if you are not out of my apartment in the next 10 seconds, I am calling the police. My mother scoffed. You wouldn't dare call the police on your own family. I dialed 911 and put the phone on speaker as it began to ring. The sound echoed in the tense silence. 911, what is your emergency? I need to report a break-in, I said, my voice clear and steady. My address is 417 River Street, apartment 4G. The intruders are still here. My parents' faces went pale. My father took a step forward. Hang up that phone, Alara. You're overreacting. Sir, please stay where you are, the dispatcher instructed, her voice sharp, having heard him. Officers are on their way. Ma'am, can you describe the intruders? They're my parents and my brother, I said, my eyes locked on theirs. They forced my door open and were going through my personal documents. Ma'am, are you in a safe location? I'm standing in the doorway, I said, taking a step back into the hall and pulling the door mostly closed. This is ridiculous, I heard my mother say from inside. We were just trying to help her. Nothing about this is helpful. I called through the door. You had no right. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me, her calm voice a lifeline, until two police officers, a woman named Officer Chin and her partner, Officer Grant, arrived a few minutes later. Miss Sterling? Officer Chin asked. When I nodded, she continued, You reported a break-in by family members? Yes. My parents and brother. They forced the door, I said, pointing to the splintered frame. They're still inside. Officer Grant knocked loudly. Police. Everyone inside, come out with your hands visible. The door opened to reveal my family, their faces a mixture of indignation and fear. My father immediately tried to take control. Officers, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. We're her parents. We were just concerned. Concerned enough to break down her door? Officer Chen asked, her expression skeptical. We were worried when she didn't answer our calls, my mother improvised weakly. So worried you decided to go through her financial papers? I gestured to the mess on my coffee table. Officer Grant turned to me. Ms. Sterling, do you wish to press charges for breaking and entering? My parents stared at me, their expressions shifting from alarm to disbelief. She won't do that, my father said dismissively. We're family. I looked at their faces, my mother's defiant, my father's arrogant, my brother's shamefaced, and I felt the last thread of obligation sever. Actually, I said, the words tasting of freedom and grief. Yes, I do. Alara, my mother whispered, her shock genuine. After everything we've done for you. Like charging my credit card for $18,000 without my permission? I asked the officers. Like breaking into my home when I stood up for myself? Yes. I want to press charges. The officers exchanged a look. There's a credit card fraud issue as well? Officer Chen asked. Yes, I confirmed. The whole story came tumbling out. We'll need you all to come down to the station to give full statements, Officer Grant said finally. He turned to my parents and Leo. Right now, we are dealing with the breaking and entering. To me, he said, since this is your residence, you can have these individuals removed immediately. Yes, my voice didn't waver. I want them removed. You can't be serious, my mother said, real tears finally tracking through her makeup. Where will we go? Back to whatever hotel you booked after your flight was canceled, I suggested. Or home. I don't care as long as it's not here. Under the officer's supervision, my family was escorted out of my building. Before leaving, Officer Chen looked at my broken door. You won't be able to secure this tonight. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? I called Chloe, who told me to come over immediately. The officers waited while I packed an overnight bag. As we left, Officer Chen handed me her card. The report will be filed in the morning. You may want to consider a restraining order. It's not uncommon in situations like this. Sometimes, the only boundary people respect is a legal one. Later, sitting on Chloe's couch, a mug of tea warming my cold hands, I felt like I was waking from a long, troubled dream. They actually broke in, Chloe said, shaking her head in disbelief. I can't believe they took it that far. I can, I said quietly. This is who they've always been. I just never said no before. My phone buzzed. It was an email from my landlord, Mr. Davies, with the subject line security footage. Attached was a clear video file showing my parents and Leo forcing my door. He assured me the door would be replaced with a high-security lock first thing in the morning, at his expense. Among the missed calls from my parents was a single text from Leo, sent after they'd been escorted away. I'm sorry, Elle. I didn't know they were going to do that. I should have stopped them. It was the first, fragile seed of accountability from any of them. But I was too exhausted to nurture it. I turned off my phone. The family I had known was gone, shattered by their own actions. And in its place, I was beginning, painfully, to build a new life, one whose foundation was not obligation, but self-respect. One where the only key to my door was my own. The weeks that followed the break-in were a strange mix of legal procedure and emotional excavation. My door was replaced with a sturdy oak one, its new steel frame and deadbolt a tangible symbol of the boundaries I was now forced to erect. I met with a lawyer, a sharp and empathetic woman named Isabel Diaz, who listened to my story without judgment and laid out my options with calm clarity. I returned to the studio, finding solace in the logic of color theory and typography, though my colleagues noticed a new, quiet intensity about me. Family emergency, I'd murmur, and they were kind enough not to press. My parents, true to form, made no direct contact. The silence was a relief, but also a confirmation of their inability to face what they had done. Instead, the fallout rippled through the extended family. My parents began a campaign of misinformation, painting me as an unstable, vindictive daughter who had overreacted to a simple misunderstanding. Awkward calls and messages trickled in from distant relatives. Your mother is heartbroken, one aunt wrote. Surely you can work this out without lawyers. I didn't engage. But the support I did receive came from the most unexpected corners. Aunt Clara called regularly, sharing more stories of my mother's past behavior that painted a broader picture of a long-standing pattern. My landlord, Mr. Davies, not only refused payment for the new door but also installed a full security system for my unit, confiding that he'd had his own difficult family experiences and understood the need to feel safe in one's own home. The most profound shift, however, came from Leo. About a month after the incident, he called me. Elle, he began, his voice hesitant. I've been doing a lot of thinking about everything you said. I think I'm starting to see it. He told me he'd asked our father for a statement from his trust fund, an inheritance from our grandmother, and had been met with anger and evasion. You have a trust fund? I asked, confused. We both do, he said quietly. From Grandma Sterling's will. We were both supposed to get access when we turned 25. I had never been told about a trust fund. Ever. A new, chilling layer of deception was uncovered. With Isabel's help, we discovered the truth. My trust had been drained, consolidated into Leo's years ago with a signature on a legal document that was a clear, if skillful, forgery of my own. My inheritance had been stolen to fund their lifestyle. This final, devastating revelation, paradoxically, brought a sense of clarity. It wasn't just about favoritism or control, it was about a deep-seated desperation and a pattern of criminal deception. It solidified my resolve. Isabel sent a cease and desist letter to my parents and their lawyer. We filed for a restraining order, which was granted. And we began proceedings to recover the stolen inheritance. As the legal process churned on, I focused on rebuilding. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Anya Sharma, who specialized in family trauma. You didn't break your family, Alara, she told me in one session. You simply refuse to continue participating in its brokenness. The discomfort everyone is feeling is the sound of a dysfunctional system being disrupted. Leo, shaken by the discovery of the forged documents, began his own journey. He moved into a small apartment on the other side of town and started meeting with a financial advisor. He started therapy. Our relationship, once defined by rivalry and resentment, began to slowly transform. We started having dinner once a month, two survivors navigating the wreckage of our shared past, carefully building something new and honest in its place. 6 months after that fateful credit card notification, I chose to settle the trust fund case out of court. My parents, facing irrefutable evidence of fraud and mounting legal fees, agreed to a settlement that returned a significant portion of what had been taken. Are you sure? Isabel had asked. We could likely get more in a trial. I'm sure, I said, a sense of peace settling over me. It's not about the money anymore. It's about closing the chapter. The settlement was enough to put a down payment on a small condo, my own quiet corner of the world. But more than that, it was an ending. It was the severance of the final, toxic financial tie that bound me to them. Last week, I booked my first solo vacation. Not to a luxury resort on the Amalfi Coast, but a quiet, week-long trip to a cabin on a lake in Maine where my grandmother used to take me as a child. It's a trip not of extravagance, but of reclamation. The evening before my departure, I received a text from Leo. Have an amazing trip, Elle. You deserve it more than anyone I know. A moment later, another text came through. Thank you for being brave enough to stop it. You saved me too. Reading his words, I felt a swell of emotion that was no longer just grief, but a complex mix of sorrow for what was lost and a quiet pride for what had been built in its place. The patterns that had defined my family for generations were finally being broken. The next morning, as my plane climbed into the vast, open sky, I looked out the window at the receding cityscape below. I had lost the family I thought I was supposed to have, the one I had spent a lifetime trying to earn a place in. But in doing so, I had found something far more valuable, a chosen family, a community built on respect and honesty, and most importantly, a deep and abiding relationship with myself. The journey ahead was unknown, but for the first time in my life, I was the one holding the map, and the horizon was wide open.